Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. I'm Ruth Carter, the Liberty Coach, and I'm back again with another Parenting Live for you. I hope that you've had a wonderful day, a wonderful week. Today, here in sunny UK, the weather has been glorious, and I hope that you and your family have had the opportunity to have a wonderful day enjoying the sunshine that we have. So today I'm going to be talking with you on the historical rites of passage. A couple of hours ago, I had put out the blog, which I wrote mainly, which was linking to culture and family, cultural rites, including the historical rites of what I could recall of my own historical rites of passage. Now, I shared with you that my parents weren't overly, coming with information like stories about, my grandparents, great grandparents, and things like that. But in terms of what they call the Black experience, that is something that my parents really didn't talk about too much. And even my mum, when I was at the age of 15, had deterred me from watching Roots, but I did. I watched it with Sharon Fabier. But I learned a lot. But like I've said previously, I was able to talk to her about it because people feel differently once they sometimes get understanding, get knowledge, and it can make them feel a different way. I took the information as part of my history and really stand here today in the 21st century to tell my ancestors we made it. They definitely must have crossed that transatlantic journey to reach the other side, whether it was the islands of Dominica or the Jamaica. But for one thing, I know for sure that I'm here. And so for my bloodline, we may have been through many trials, struggles, slavery, but we've also got some massive achievements that we've been able to contribute to the world also. So if you're tuning in for the first time, please visit the other blogs and the other vlogs that I've done over the coming weeks, because my intention is to share with you the 10 different rites of passage. I added the culture and family just so that we can start to explore, talk with our children about who we are, where we come from, what our culture is, and if we are currently participating in them, whether it's within our own families or extended family members or community groups. So as always, I do read from the rites of passage, from the Strengthening Families, Strengthening Communities Parenting Manual, just so we get an essence of the topic, subjects, and as always, I give you the steps, but on the blog, you've got the activities. Believe this week there are 12 different activities to choose from, and I may go over a couple of them today, depending on how much time we've got. So I'll kick off and read the little passage. So it's historical rite of passage. If one does not know where one was born, one has been, one doesn't know where one is going. History gives us a sense of who we are, a sense of history, our story. Is vital to providing our children with the direction they need to survive. The suggested activities that follow will help you assist your child in making the historical journey from childhood to adulthood. Now, with a lot of the things that we've covered, I'm pretty sure that many of you parents are currently doing it now, but may not even be thinking about it. It's part of your culture, it's part of your activities, it's a part of the things that you do. And I'd like to say, before I go any further, happy Eid to all of you that are celebrating today with your family, friends, and loved ones. My daughter is celebrating with her auntie, so I hope they're having a wonderful celebration today. So, going back to historical rites of passage, where do you originate from originally? So I have spoken about my mum is from Jamaica and my dad is from Dominica, and I'm really glad to be identify with both of those islands. I was born here in the UK, but my history goes further back. With discussions with families over the years on who we are, where we come from, and just to get a sense of who the people were that I may not have met. So, for example, I never met my paternal grandmother or my paternal grandfather. My granddad, my dad's dad, died when in 1972, before I was even born. So I didn't even know of him. But because I've been able to visit the island of Dominica several times, I've been able to engage with family members, both young and old, those that knew my grandfather, and to hear who he was, what he was like, and the stories. And that goes for the same with my grandmother. I actually don't know what my granddad looks like. I have never seen a picture of him, but I have seen pictures of my grandmother who's from Dominica, and I remember seeing them from when I was young, growing up, of pictures that she would send and letters that she'd write to my dad. And even when my dad used to visit back years and years ago, um, they would take pictures and obviously share pictures with us. So I feel that she knew me as much as I knew her, in terms of, even though we may never have met, I'm positive my father shared, I've had a daughter, I've had a son, I've had this, their names are this is what they're doing, they're going to school. Because I actually do remember the day that my grandmother died. I remember my dad picked me up from school that day, and generally he doesn't pick me up from school, but obviously he must have finished work early. That's what I'm assuming. But I remember my dad picking me up from school, but he was really upset. And I remember walking up the road and I said, Daddy, what is wrong? And he said, I've lost my mother. And I could feel that hurt, even at that young, tender age. I could feel his hurt. And I believe I remember him saying, like, now he felt, and my dad at that time was grown. I think he could have been in his 40s, maybe, or yeah, coming up to 50s, late 40s, possibly. And I remember my dad saying that he felt like the umbilical cord had been cut, and I suppose that was his journey of grief. But I'm really grateful to my parents who have shared information with me about where they're coming from. For my mum's side of the family, I've been fortunate to meet both my grandmother and my grandfather. In fact, my grandfather used to look after me when I was very young, before he travelled back to Jamaica. And as a child, I'd write to my grandparents and they would write back. I still have the letters today. Like, those letters are like 40 plus, no, not 40, 30 plus years old. But it's a way that we can, keep in touch with our history. So, what do you share with your children? How do you share your historical passage with them? What information do you share, and when do you share it? Because, like I said, with my mum, she didn't want me to watch Roots, and I was 15 at the time. Was I old enough to watch it? I watched it, and I don't think it impacted me negatively. What it did, it gave me information. And I do remember being in a history lesson with, when I was back in high school. And I do remember in that year, we were doing some discussion, but the teacher was emphasizing about Britain not having any sugar, and that the sugar had stopped, and was making a real poignant point on it, but with no other information. So I said, the sugar stopped when the slave trade ended. Is that what this was about? And she was like, no, this is not what we're talking about. We're not talking about that. And it was just shut down. But it was, because it was around that same time. So even for me, growing up here in the UK, going to school, and even in fact, this is now a topic now about introducing the history lessons to cover a variety of more subjects. And I know that the government has reported back that they do cover it. But the thing is, I know the schools get to choose what they cover in terms of the history, in terms of Black history. But I think it's a matter of that they may not feel very comfortable or even confident to even teach that subject as thoroughly as it could be to match the colonization of what was taking place in Britain. Not just focusing on Britain's side, but focusing on those other places that helped get Britain to become great. So I touched on some history points in terms of, you know, where my grandmother originated from. So she is a native of Dominica in terms of we have what they would call Arawak Indians, Caribs. That is her background. So her people have always been on that island. And whereas my mum side, they came from Africa and moved over. And I think from my paternal grandfather, he has African roots as well. But then when we look deeper, I was trying to go back further back because when I was younger, I would say about 20 plus years ago, I took the chance to start a family tree. And I wish I started on my dad's side of the family because it kind of put me off. But I went round the older members of the family asking different questions so that I could put people together and ascertain any dates. So I knew like I said, on my maternal side, I knew my grandmother and my grandfather. So I had a starting point. And then it was looking at who their siblings were. And just doing that part alone, along that bridge, you might as well say, that's where I kind of started to see some cracks. And as I kept asking, it kind of was like, oh no, we don't want to talk about that. Oh no, we don't want to talk about that. But as you start connecting the dots, you start to see things. And one of the TV shows that I have enjoyed here in the UK is called Horrible Histories, and it is for children, and it gives them a glimpse in a, I would say, kind of comical but very truthful way about our past. So it's about us learning different factors of history. Because I was born here, I know a lot about what has happened in the history of the UK. And for my Caribbean history, I've had to go visit the island. I've had to ask questions with family members, read books, and watch films, and just talk to other people who are maybe not historians, but people who do a lot of research into history. But I am glad that a starting point for me was to be able to talk on some of the factors with my mum and my dad, even though when I was writing my dissertation, because I was writing it on Black girls and boys and the comparisons within the education system, I had to go deep, deep, deep back 500-600 years on the history of Black people. And I realised I should have gone a bit further, but I got a B plus for the paper, so I didn't mind. But when I asked my dad to read it, he got upset. He got upset. He's like, why are you bringing up the past? Why are you bringing this up? But I was bringing it up because it added to the discussion that I was having, especially when you're talking about Black people, you do have to mention about the Black experience, and that differs from different people. So I can only speak from my own perspective with what I know in terms to my historical rights, and I can only go back a couple of generations just through storytelling and basic information. For me to go forward and go even further back, I would need to look at records, birth and death records. Now, I'm not asking you to do all that. The stories and the information should be good enough. But because I am a researcher, I do like to take those ventures. So I also have a part of my own journey to continue with in finding that information. But what I do know about my history is that it's very colourful. It's not just black and white, pun intended. It is a variety of different things. It's a variety of different ways. And some of the culture has been lost, but some of it has been gained anew from a new perspective from the islands wherever my ancestors settled. So I am going to go through some of the steps, and there's not many, but this is just an invitation to you just to have a discussion with your children and further explore your history as well as your culture. Like today, Eid is being celebrated all over the world. That goes back to a historical time, which I'm sure that they're remembering. And isn't it good that we can, in the 21st century, still hold on to some of our ancestral traditions and know the reasons why we have these celebrations? So, if you do have any questions, I always invite you to put them in the comments. This is being streamed live here on Facebook and YouTube, and it is also accessible on Instagram, IGTV, and on Twitter. So whichever channel that you're watching on, please feel free to leave a comment and share. So step number 1, help your child learn about your culture, ethnic groups' contribution in the world's history. So have a think about, who you are, where you come from, and is there anyone in your island or your country that has positively contributed to the world? Now, I know if we start with Africa, for example, there are lovely, beautiful, especially museums, a lot of African artifacts, a lot of history right there going back centuries, which hold really positive and sometimes negative, because in some of the pictures that I picked up, they were from the museum in Liverpool where they have the slave museum, and there are some real historical relics there and artifacts. And I posted some of those pictures just to highlight and connect with some of my culture. And I do remember going there with my friend Sharon, and I use oils, essential oils, and I had put console, like, to console us before we went in. And I think me and Sharon were the only ones back on the coach whose disposition was a lot more cheerier than everybody else on the coach. Other people were upset, mad, angry about the history and what's happened. It's in the past, but today in our present, we're still seeing some of the negative things that people face from different races. So, who has positively contributed to the world? I could mention one name, but it's not as old in history, but there's lots of positive things that we're seeing. We're seeing music, we're seeing instruments. When I went into that museum, I'm telling you, I saw shoes, bags, and things made from how many centuries ago that looked better than the shoes that are made today. We're talking about talent and skills from our past and our history, which are positive contributions to the world. We have music, we have fashion, we have authors, we have stories, we have poems. There's lots and lots of positive things, and some have been really fortunate to have learned something in Africa, gone through that tragic transatlantic journey and kept hold of some of the stories of who they were to this very day. That, I think, is wonderful and marvelous. Whereas for me, that was cut. I may never, ever, ever find a connection to Africa but I know it exists. But I have to use the information that I have. Does it deter me? No. It just means that, I come from a place deep down which is fruitful, which is abundant, and it shows strength, tenacity, persistence to be here, to live, to raise our children, our families, our family name. Because that's one of the things my dad has always said, the only thing we have is our name. So we need to live good by it. And I do take that dearly. Other people, we've got contributions, we've got sports, we've got music. Bob Marley's a big one that people remember, but he I would consider to be in more recent times. But see, some of those African beats, those African drums, those African rhythms, you may hear some of those themes in old cultures and genres of music, even down to reggae music that we have today. So have that talk with your child. Discover who's invented things. There's lots and lots of things our people have contributed to the world, and it is so good to have those discussions with them so that we can focus on some more positive contributions and not just the negative ones. Number 2, help your child develop and maintain circles of interdependence. So in the program, there is an actual section about interdependence, which I will go through with you. But for now, just in a nutshell, it's a circle, and there's lots of different segments. And what we encourage parents to do is to look at themselves, their grandparents on both sides, maternal and paternal, and name people in their circle. That's one of the exercises, just so that we know who our links are, who our family are, and from the children's perspective, who they identify as people in their circle of interdependence, their circle of support. Who do they go to? And if, like me, there are no, like I didn't have my paternal grandparents, but I had other elderly people in the community that acted as that. In fact, my neighbour, Annie, years and years ago, from when I was a child growing up, I used to call her Nanny and her husband Grandad, like for years. These are white people, but I called them Nanny and Grandad because I grew up here and I didn't have my, because she treated me like a grandchild would. She was my neighbour, but she was very caring, really considerate, and I do miss her. But I had a sense of that elderhood around me, that guidance. And so it may not be just family. And another thing that you can do with this circle of interdependence is see who your children would go reach out for support. Because when we do the follow-up activities, one of the things that we have found, parents are shocked by the people their children have put on there. They would have never thought. I remember one story where a lady didn't particularly like her neighbours, and she would have never thought that her daughter would have gone to them for support or put them on her support network. And she did. And she didn't understand why. She says, I don't even like them. But it all probably depends on how they treat the child. If people are nice to children, children respond very positively to that, like I did with my neighbour. If I had the opportunity to do this exercise with my mum and dad as I was a child, definitely my neighbours would have been on that, as well as other family members and possibly some cousins, because I have cousins that are older. So I will cover that with you so that you can go into depth with that a little bit more. It's just an exercise. I might just do it as an exercise for you. So number 3, participate in family gatherings with your child and help your child develop and maintain relationships with the elderly. I just look at how good that is. I literally was just saying that just a second ago. I think it is very, very important to have, that full circle. You know, you've got families where you've got the new babies coming in, you've got the children running around, you've got the teenagers, you've got the young adults, you've got the adults, and then you've got, you know, the seniors, and then you've got those that are much, much, much older. Those, that is like for me a full circle of people of different ages, of different experience, that can add value into your life as well as your children's, and can be very supportive as long as their characteristics and they're very good people in their heart. Because sometimes, you know, even there could be people in your own family that they're not too good. And those are the types of people you don't want your children to be spending time with. And if you're aware of it, don't allow them to. So, number 4, help your child learn about ethnic, cultural, historical figures and their messages. So, we have very many prominent leaders. I'm just going to mention one. Martin Luther King, I have a dream. That was his message. But who else could you think of that you can talk to your children about in terms of your culture, your ethnic background? And then we have number 5. Help your child develop plans to improve his or her ethnic group and community. How can we get more involved with the community? Because this is strengthening families, strengthening communities. So once we're strengthening our families, what can we do to strengthen our communities? Do you mix with your own ethnic groups within your community? Do you mix with other ethnic groups within your community? I have had that experience. I did a project with Luton Tigers, and the founder, he's from Bangladesh background, but predominantly a lot of the people participating that we had connection with was with the Asian community. I happened to be on the chair at the time as the Black representative, but it was a very, very different experience, but very much the same, because it was my first endeavour working with the community group that was different to mine. But I sat there and I thought, as though there may be many differences, there are so many things that bring us together and are very, very similar. So what could we find out about our history within the community? It could extend it a little bit more. At the moment, I'm doing a project with the Windrush project, doing some writing on that. And so therefore, you know, that is something that happened in our history, and it's something that, you know, my parents definitely took 2 different journeys to this country, but it's a journey all the same and a story. And I also, like, I know my granddad from my maternal side was here, but I only found out, I think, within the last year that my paternal grandfather came over to the United Kingdom for a spell. Probably, I don't know, maybe in 1912 or something, way back when. So we're talking a very, very long time ago. But it's because he took that journey which opened the doorway for my dad and his brothers to come here, as well as other family members. And the last one but not least, help your child develop plans to enhance his or her town, country, and the world. Now, I wonder what they would want to do when they get older. You know, when you're little, when your mind is full of imagination, your plans are big, they are global. But if we start like small with our town, how are you contributing? Some people, I live in Luton, some people get involved with the cultural arts that we have here, carnival arts. We've got also other, the Black heritage here. People in the community get involved in that. And then you have also different sports events that may be involving your cultural background, your ethnic groups and things like that. You may play together, you may play against each other, but it's something that we do in our towns when it comes within our country, well, I feel like definitely for 2020, I've probably signed more petitions this year than I have done in any other year. And why do I do that? To bring changes that we need in our country. And then on a global front, how do we help our children to make changes there? And I always say, start with you. Be a good citizen, be upright, do the right thing, and make positive contributions. Making a positive contribution in your town does eventually help your country, which eventually will help the world. It may seem small, but it's good and it can grow. So that is the steps for this week. If you have any questions on that, please say and let me know. Oh, good evening, my lovely. I hope you're doing well. Thank you for watching. So I'm going to quickly go over because the time is going. Just a couple. Now, like I said, we have 12 of the historical rights. Oh, I'm going to pick one to go through. One that you could do. Oof. Well, I talked on this one. It says, trace with your child the origins of their name. Now, actually, that's a good one because both of my children, well, I picked my daughter's name. Her name is from a Swahili background and it means life. My ex-husband chose my son's name, and all I know is that the interpretation of it means Zion. My name is Ruth. It is a biblical name and it means a faithful friend. But it's good that they know that, you know, because I picked my daughter's name, so I knew where it come from. So as she was growing up, I was able to talk to her about it all the time. And then with my son, I'll be like, oh, your dad chose your name, but it means Zion. So he knows and he can, you know, tell other people about his name, where it came from, and that his dad chose his name. And I've heard both of my children's names with other people, sometimes boys and girls actually. But a name is your name. It's part of your identity, just like your culture. It's a part of who you are and your history. But it's only just to bring you to the present moment of what's happened in the past. You get to choose what you do with that information, how you use it going forward in your life. Do you use it as a stepping stone to plunge yourself further into a better version of yourself? Which I would say, yes, do that. But we all have a history, some nice, some not so nice, but definitely it's something that you should have a discussion with your children about. I just want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope you enjoy the blog. Again, please leave comments and share. Take care and have a lovely, lovely day. God bless you.